Hey, everybody. All righty. This is just another way to look at that list that I just gave you, but putting it on the Enneagram symbol makes it a little easier to look at this process of initiating a thought, facilitating it moving forward, then being able to produce something with that thought or inspiration or urge, because the one is that first urge out of 9. And then 4, seeing, okay, individuation and curation. How do we make something that is beautified or more exclusive? And so customization. So specialization is also customization, like which seeds you're going to take and reproduce, give to the 3 to have them plant everywhere. And the 4 will have noticed the best tasting fruit, the beautiful looking fruit. Like apples right now are pretty much chosen based on their sugar content and the way the outside of the apple looks, because they look more desirable than something that doesn't have a thick skin and gets bruised very easily. So all these things matter. So you can see it as a circle, but you can also see the prominence of the 3, 6, 9, which I always leave in, because they really are the issue of each center. Now, for example, with the 1, you have to get to standardization or you're not going to maintain anything. You have to have ways, like I was just working with something with my materials, and if someone else doesn't realize, wait, they're standardized so that I can move one slide in and another slide out for a different training, then it works. But if people are moving the placement of the numbers or the placement of the words or the placement of the Enneagram symbol, all of a sudden I can't use them together. So in the long run, the 1 is saying there must be standardization. And how do you get to that? Well, you have to have the concept, and then you have to have some sort of insight about that concept. And then you have to correct any errors or flaws in that concept. And then you have a set of principles that are the way you standardize something. And then you have something in place that's more solid and more universally usable in terms of systems. And then the 2 is saying, well, that's all fine and good, but if we don't explain to people why they need to be doing it or what it means to them, their relationship to it, and we don't give them the ingredients or what they need to know to care and a reason that it'll help them, then why would they do it? And so the 2 is saying what people need and what is needed in the way of ingredients to ensure that this wonderful idea that the 1 has recognized can actually come to more fruition, because you have more buy-in. And the 2 is saying what people need, not just it's needed in a black and white sense, the way you or I might address, but they're saying, well, wait, people have to want to do it. And I'm thinking, well, we just need to do it. We want to do it. Okay, I don't want to do everything, but you give me a good reason and I'll do it. But 2 recognizes that people can be kind of made more comfortable with things, tended to in a way that there'll be buy-in. Whereas the 3 is then saying, wait, we have to identify how to do it. And so the 3 conceives, I can imagine having, an orchard laid out in this way, or a small orchard, and we can test different zones as to how things come to fruition and what the weaknesses were and the strengths in terms of the outcome. And so they can then activate things that go beyond the mere concept of 1. Now it's like, okay, what do we need to do to make it really come into being? So, and if we don't identify what we want as the outcome and the ideal outcome, the best outcome, then we're missing an opportunity to optimize and accelerate the process. Now, we put optimization at 7, and there is a lookalike between 3 and 7 where I could put optimization at 7. They want optimal, but they really want ideal over optimal. And kind of the union of ideal and optimal matches 7 more, but the actual, okay, how can we be more efficient so that we can accelerate the process to get to the results faster? That driven quality of 3 is with those 4 words. And these 4 words will make more sense when I do the fruit tree analogy. Then with the 4, this specialization really means you've got to individuate. You've got to see the individual trees that perform the best. Oh dear, the tree that had the best tasting fruit did not look the best. And that's not what a 4 wants. So the 4's trying to get the marriage of the two, like the best tasting, the best appearing. And what do you need to do to make that happen? And so that it doesn't just taste delicious, but it looks beautiful, desirable, and kind of in a way worthy of being the best tree. Because if it doesn't look good for the 4, it loses appeal. So keeping things, whatever it is, appealing. And you do that by customizing. Well, okay, these 2 trees performed well. Well, what made them perform well? What were the components? Enter number 5. Well, they had more winds and more sunlight, less sunlight. The water didn't drain as well. It puddled, and so the roots became more towards the surface. And okay, so the roots that were deeper had better tasting fruit. Whatever the components are, we need the 5 who would have carefully documented every variable just by nature, but in terms of a process, they're the best. In fact, your Tritype is really the best at doing that. The only other Tritype that can do it really well is the 1-3-5 and the 1-3-6. But in each case, 1 is the common denominator. And the systemization, though, is kind of 3 and 5 coming together. But the 5 is doing it by first observing, then analyzing what they observe, documenting all these variables, and then coming up with a system to not only continue documenting, but to then notice any future endeavors of the same type will benefit from knowing these downfalls, really. Because the 5 is always seeing the other side to every equation, because it's the first point in the opposing sector of the head center. And then in the case of the 6, it's okay, well, okay, we need regulation to keep everybody honest, but what do we need to prepare? What do we need to do to make sure it's fair for everyone? And how do we safeguard all this work that we participated in to get more food for everyone, not just for one person? And what are the potential downfalls or problems? What can go wrong? And that's really the opposition seeing, well, wait, we think we have plenty of food, but will everyone take it fairly? Or do we need a system? And the 5 said, well, I just gave you a system. We just need to implement it. And then there's translation that needs to happen. And it then becomes workable. Because a lot of times 5s will do all this kind of investment and understanding, but they won't tell other people or explain it. Or if they do, they go on to such a detail about it that people glaze over. So it's really helping them communicate what they've learned in a way that the 6 understands it. And then the 6 knows how to then look at the different situations, see the inconsistencies, and know what needs to be further explained so that they don't have the hard job of trying to get people to follow a policy or procedure. If they don't understand it, how's anyone else going to understand it? So this is why the sixes do so much explaining. Like if you ever are typing a six, which I'm a specialist with, because the sixes that can't find their type eventually come to me. And they want to tell me everything ahead of time, maybe in the email and at the beginning of the session. And I just chuckle, because they're meant to try and give the person that they've hired, their authority, every detail so that they get the correct answer and evaluation. But what they don't realize, like with the Enneagram, just the mere fact of overemphasizing their descriptions are already cognitively set. And actually, when you're working with the Enneagram, you need to see it emerge. And the explanation is the emergence of six. No other type needs to explain everything over and over again throughout a session, through wherever they are. If they don't understand something, they'll repeat it. And I used to think with sixes, I didn't know what they were, but I just said, why? Yeah, are you thinking I didn't understand you the first time or the second time? Oh, I just wanted to be sure. So they might tell me something 3 times. I said, yeah, actually got it the first time. It'd be easier if you just said, hey, did you understand what I said? And then ask me to feed it back to you, and then you'll know. And they said, oh, well, that hadn't occurred to them. But I was just kind of baffled that they think I didn't understand. But they're right. A lot of people don't understand, that they're not necessarily paying attention. Like if you've ever had your hair cut and you want, an inch taken off, and then at the end of the haircut, 3 inches have been taken off. There's been a miscommunication. And the six is always wary, like, does the person know? Let me tell them again. Because they want the outcome to work. It's not a negative thing. The six is really trying to predict the outcome that would be favorable. So they over-explain. But the high side of explanation is more people kind of have a similar understanding. And the six is the point of the group, like who belongs to whom, and what is general, what is individualistic, and all the variables. So then type 7 is, as I mentioned, diversification. And then once you have that, then you've got to celebrate what is and the variation. And then that's inspiring. But in the end result, you get more sophistication. Everything gets better. Everything gets more refined, more complete. Even though the 7 then wants to diversify again, and then everything kind of gets thrown up in the air and reorganized. But sophistication takes time. If you're just doing something for the first time, you maybe get it, maybe you don't. Like, it was always interesting to me to go into different parts of the country, and then there'd be certain kind of a look or feel in each area. Like Beach City was very different than LA. LA was different from New York. New York was different from San Francisco. And I noticed that people would start to dress like wherever they were. So if I found myself doing the same thing, like if I was working for 2 weeks in New York, well, what am I going to do on my free time? I'm going to look around the stores, and I will have for 2 weeks, or at least a week, have seen people kind of have a certain look. I was on vacation in France. I was in Paris. And I thought, wow, everyone's wearing the same 2 colors and the same plaid. It's like, I thought, Paris would be kind of very individualistic. No, they were very good at a polished, perfected suit. And what people would do that was so different from the US is we'd just buy lots of stuff and turn it over. They would have very few suits, but they'd be meticulously done, from the tiniest top stitching to the best wools. But they all knew what that look was. And New York was not unlike that. Everyone, if when Norma Kamali, I'm dating myself, but when her fashion came out with the higher shoulders and the fitted waist, the hourglass silhouette, everyone, someone was in Norma Kamali. So I thought, okay, I'll try one of those on. Why not? But that's how it happens. So sophistication is a result of knowing the variables and then kind of going beyond just refining them, because 4 wants to be individualized, where 7 is ready to move to full autonomy, which is point 8. So at the top of the social hierarchy, you want to be the best exemplar of that. And there has to be something new and novel and changing, but it has to have a certain level of sophistication. Whatever it is, whether it's a piece of machinery or a project, it needs sophistication for a 7. And a 7 is going to be pushing towards that and refining, adding new, and they'll test things and then throw them out. They're not afraid to try things. A lot of fashion is the result of the 7 kind of imagination. And some of it's just like, yeah, not good. Get rid of that fashion. But other things set trends, and there's something about them that works, whether it's in furniture or clothing or buildings, it's all the same. The 7 seeing the way to creatively modify something and then add a new twist. And in that, then having it be kind of seen as the top of the possibilities. So it can't be so standardized that it's boring. It has to be fluid and changing and moving. Now, 8 is the point of full autonomy, which we'll go through with the roles, but it's like, first you have to expand. You can't just look at your little territory, your little storehouse where you're disseminating the food through some sort of system or regulation, which is the beginning of that at point 6. But 8 is saying, what's the far-reaching consequences? So, okay, we don't want people to take from each other, but what about the people we don't even know that are traveling in groups across our territory and could steal our food? So it's kind of sending out those 6 scouts to see any inconsistencies or movement patterns or tribes, let's say symbolically or otherwise, that could encroach upon the bigger territory. Because 8, 9, and 1 are all about the boundaries. And I mentioned that it was consumption. I was like, okay, stop the celebrating already. Let's just eat that good fruit and have the enjoyment to the point of satisfaction. So 8 is saying you have to have enough. Too much is almost enough. I used to say that as a little kid when I wanted more cookies. And I didn't know that there was a similar saying out there, but my parents just laughed. I had an 8 father, and he just said, yeah, that's right, Kate. Too much is almost enough. Because then you have extra. And you're not beholden to anyone because you have too much. And then, as I mentioned earlier with the 9, it's like the assimilation that happens, not just eating it, not the consumption, but chewing it, mulling it over. What does it mean? What's related to what? And wait, that's too complicated. What's the common denominator? What's simpler? What puts everything more at ease? What in the long run gives relaxation and comforts? And that's getting back to simplification. So it starts with the whole and it moves out to the individual spokes of each type, but then it collapses into the whole again, which means simplification.